authentic supplier has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really
respond to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say, we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
WESN.
It's an interesting thing once you reach a certain age. I tend to look back on the past with a lot of nostalgia. Rose-colored glasses, because it wasn't always a better time, a nicer time, a more responsible, generous, graceful time. There were issues back then. But I do find it interesting that as time has progressed, we have progressed, for better or worse. Both has happened simultaneously. It's the strange thing where we can't help but not get out of our own way, as the vast majority of problems that we find ourselves in, ultimately speaking, are man-made. A lot of the economic problems are essentially our inability to find enough common ground and efficiently utilize our resources, and to be content with efficiently using our resources for the greater good. A lot of our social issues are disagreements on what we perceive to be proper, whatever, whether it's regards to religion, gender identity, sexuality, political policy, governance, etc., racial identity. And one of the things now, as we progress, is we are not as simplistic as we used to be. And some of that is for the better, and some of that is for the worst. There is a situation in the TTPS where one officer apparently took 2 days leaves, got himself a piercing in one ear and his nose, and his superiors did not respond very well. Now, there are two levels to this. There's the should he have the right to have piercings in the first place, and then was the response appropriate? The appropriateness itself, you could technically kind of break that into two, right? Because the appropriateness of having a negative response in the sense that, look, we don't allow it. Now, I'm not entirely sure what the TTPS's policy is, because there was a case with regards to tattoos where the judge basically ruled, it seems very hypocritical. I'm paraphrasing here, that recruits were not allowed to have tattoos, but officers could have tattoos. And at that point, I was like, well, what's the point of having these laws? Police officers and military officers, but particularly police, tend to not have tattoos and piercings, especially visible ones, in order to have a certain professional image. Remember, you're kind of dealing with the public. And yes, I understand some people might call it outdated, but to some extent, you don't You don't see men with hair and beards all over the place in certain paramilitary organizations and women with their hair all over the place either, right? Why? Like any office, you want a certain amount of professionalism, but it's a little bit different when you need people to trust and believe you in critical moments. Then there's also potential safety concerns because being a police officer, you could get in some altercations. And there are certain jobs where people don't wear wedding rings for practical reasons, right? You don't want it to be damaged. You don't want it to snag on something and cause you to end up being in an accident. And to some extent, the risks vary, right? But as far as I could see, and I have not checked everywhere, but as far as I could see in a quick perusal, the piercings may have a similar policy position. At the very least, I could only confirm that I think, according to another court ruling, recruits can't have piercings. But what about current officers? Well, his superiors responded very negatively. And to some extent, you could argue, because you know how authoritarian people are, especially people my age and older. Back in the day, your teacher, your parents, your boss, whoever, you do something wrong, and you get essentially everything thrown at you except, depending on your position and workplace, except maybe outright cuss words coming at you, right? And I don't think they cursed at him, but essentially, you know, he described that as being demeaning, disrespectful, and discriminatory. Now, the last part, I mean, we don't know what was said, right? I myself don't necessarily know if he either has or believes to have religious reasons for these piercings. Also, he went on to use a small flame outside the station to say his prayers because he was stressed over the situation. One of 3 disciplinary notices were with regards to the use of a small fire. Again, that's one of the things where it seems to me this officer might be doing things that he's not accustomed to doing. So part of my questions is why, right? Or at the very least his superiors and his peers are not accustomed to seeing him do these things. So why now? What exactly is the reason? I'm not saying he's not justified. It's just that's my curiosity over the situation, right? Don't take that and run with it. But the greater question is, one, does he have a right or should he have a right? Those are not the same questions. Those are 2 separate questions. To have piercings as a police officer. Is this something that we're willing to accept? Because note, once you allow these things to happen, and you might think, oh, well, his piercing is fine. But then now, you have to understand, you can't just say, well, in this case, it's fine, and we'll say the policy allows for it, and everybody in future will limit it just to that. And then now if you put a number on it, why? Why are you putting a number on it? That's arbitrary too, right? So then, well, you have no limit. And then what are you going to do if you see an officer with 1,000,001 piercings on his face? How will the public react to him or her? Maybe they might be prejudicial against him. That might impede his capacity to do his job. More importantly, what happens now if you see an officer maybe with an earring or a tattoo that may borderline look like a gang affiliation? I don't know. So these things are not so clear-cut because you could argue the reasoning for it, at least to some extent, is archaic. It's from a different time. Do you need to not have piercings and not have visible tattoos to be professional looking? Remember, we're not talking about a delivery driver or a front desk receptionist or even a marketing manager. And to some extent, some corporate businesses wouldn't want you to have visible tattoos or visible piercings, right? I mean, for women to have earrings, that's essentially understood and it's fine. But not every office wants women with 15 earrings in one ear. Right? Is it right or wrong? And now then, that's a whole different situation to police officers. That, to some extent, may end up being in the courts. That's what the officer is essentially threatening. But then there's also how his superiors responded. Was it appropriate level of the response? Not just the actual should they respond or not. And as sad as it is, these are some of the things that if you want a professional service, it's not just about the looks, but rather it's how they treat their own officers. Do they treat their officers professionally? Do they lead them with professionalism? Because that trickles down to how then the officers interact with us. Think about it. There are a lot of people out there that are not paid enough to put up with their managers and the bad customers crap. So essentially they end up being bad customer service representatives themselves because it's a low-paying job, because it's too stressful. I'm not paid enough for this nonsense. Why do we think police officers are going to 100% be immune to a very human reaction to a situation where, am I paid enough to put up with this nonsense? And the words I want to say is not nonsense, but I can't say it on it. And yes, the pay might not necessarily be the issue, but the flip side to that is, let's not forget, this is a highly stressful job where people overwork themselves to death. Post-COVID, it's been heart attacks galore in the media. It's just too many. It's not like the TTPS is an organization with 100,000 people, and you're just going to statistically get people to die of natural causes in their 40s and 30s randomly just like that, because of statistics, just because of just natural variance. To me, it's alarming. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe our sample size of 6,000, 7,000, whatever it is enough to have that level of unnatural, natural death. But it's stressful enough. You technically are being asked to put yourselves in dangerous situations. I don't know if they're trained enough for all of these situations they're put in. And then to top it all off, if you're being mistreated by your bosses and mistreated by members of the public, you're distrusted, you're cussed out at times, people don't necessarily trust you, and they don't show you the respect you need to do your job. I'm not talking about respect the badge just cause, right? And to lord your position over other people, which some officers do, to be fair. So you're also paying the price for your peers who are either corrupt or just are bad officers. You got to put up with all of this. Are we surprised that it trickles down and professionalism in the service is more or less shot? It's really hard to come down on the juniors who are acting unprofessionally if seniors, the ones who are supposed to be ensuring that the rank and file conform to the required disciplinary and professional standards, they themselves are not living up to it. If you look at large nations and their militaries, they are very professional NCOs. They wake up earlier, all of their ducks in a row. Everything about their uniform is squared away. There's no creases, there's no wrinkles, there's no lint, there's no dust. They hold themselves to a standard in order to then hold their juniors to a standard when necessary, when acceptable, when required. So at a time when I get it, I understand. Some people think this is not an important topic. We have a crime situation. I don't care if he has piercings in his nose. I wanted to deal with the criminals. Yeah, but to some extent, I'll argue. If he's going to be this distressed over something like this, we do have to question. If the police officer is taking a principled stance, he feels disrespected, and he wants to ensure that things like this are rectified, that is someone with strength of character. Fine. I applaud him for it. We need more of that. If it's because he is emotionally distressed and upset over the situation and he doesn't like how he was treated, then I don't know to what extent he has or he is displaying strength of character to say, that's the guy that when the bullets start firing, I expect him, I am confident that he will run in that direction. Maybe he is. Maybe he is. Or maybe he's soft. It's hard to tell. To some extent, I actually might want to see this thing come to trial for more than one reason, right? But to maybe kind of settle this thing. I don't necessarily know if judges are going to get it right, however, because to some degree in the tattoo case, I was ready to disagree with the judge. I am not a lawyer. I would be disagreeing from the perspective of a layman, except when he points out the fact that it seemed as though once you are an officer, you could have a tattoo. It really does sink the whole new recruits can't have tattoos. And then in that case that he was speaking on specifically, the potential recruit was in the process of trying to get the tattoos removed, and they denied him anyway. I would think it would be practical. You're in the process of removing tattoos? All right, we'll move forward. Because it's not as though the police service is just, you know, they have so many officers, they could barely take any more recruits. Now, maybe because of payroll, that might be true. But arguably, their personnel situation, I really don't think anyone could say that their personnel situation is being managed with any degree of professionalism and efficiency and strategic considerations for the future and for the job performance of the service, right? And you could throw that across the board, the public sector, and to some extent, it happens in the private sector as well, don't get me wrong. It's just that what happens in the private sector isn't as directly impactful in our lives like what happens in the police service. So I was ready to disagree with the judge, but the situation in the case, I can't, right? And that's the tattoo case. In this piercing case, I don't know if the judge is going to get it right or wrong. He was speaking, and that judge was speaking on the tattoo case where how arbitrary it was, the standards of the service at the time. It's almost like if he wanted to change the policies of the TTPS. I think if they're being hypocritical about it, that's fine. But I don't know if necessarily just his view on what's arbitrary or not, because you're applying a standard that potentially it works for everywhere else, but you're talking non-paramilitary organizations when you speak about everywhere else. I don't know if that is appropriate. But we have to wait and see. Meanwhile, again, why this is important. If you can't fix the simple things, if you can't deal with the small things, how are you going to deal with the big things? There's a reason why, you know, certain paramilitary organizations have certain standards of appearance and professionalism and cleanliness, right? Some of it is traditional lessons learned for certain situations that aren't day-to-day pertinent, right? Again, you don't want your officers potentially having to take time off because they got another piercing and maybe it had an infection or they got sick or the tattoo artist was not necessarily clean with regards to his implements. So, you know, I got a skin rash that gave me an infection, that gave me a flu. You don't want things like that to happen. That's just one aspect of it. But it is what it is. We have progressed for better or worse, as I said earlier. So now let's kind of see. At the end of the day, it all depends on how we as a society wants to move forward, really and truly. I don't know what public opinion would be on something like this. But again, let me reiterate the point for a third time. If the police service is kind of acting willy-nilly over this topic and can't, you see, I don't care what the policy is to some extent, right? I just care that you show good reasoning for whatever policy you adopt and you apply it consistently. And that last part is where I am kind of concerned that it's not really being applied consistently. Because you know what typical Trinity responses would be. Why so serious? It's all right. It's not a big deal, blah, 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 blah. Well, listen, it's fine. If it's not a big deal, let it go. But don't kind of gateway things on a selective basis arbitrarily. And the whole thing about the prayers and the open flame, that's a whole other kettle of fish. I don't know if it might take a judge to kind of unwind that, because where religion and national security entities and HR practices kind of meet, it's always going to be semi-controversial. And it's just one of those things where, to what extent, post-application, should the service be expected to conform to your religion when you knew going in what the standards were? Right? I'm not saying that they don't necessarily have a reasonable case. I'm just saying that is an interesting question that perhaps we need more legal consideration. And I don't just mean a trial, but really, things like this, perhaps this is what universities are for, this is what academic institutions are for, and forums are for. Because I'm not necessarily liking the answer either way right now, and perhaps it needs more behind it. All right, I've gone on enough about a topic that, to be honest, I literally just saw 5 minutes before they started the show and said, hey, I want to speak about that before I speak about anything else. But it's caused things to go over time. I will say this. The last thing I'll say before I take a break. I know we started late. We apologize for that. But the last thing I'll say is, and this will transition a little bit to the first topic in the daily review. The deputy political leader, one of the newly minted deputy political leaders of the PNM, Jennifer Baptiste-Primus, she is very confident that the PNM will recover lost ground. And she is confident in the leadership of Penelope Beckles. And here's the thing. It might seem like more of the same. It's very tempting for me to say, I don't know why she's saying these things. They ain't recovered not anything yet, right? And it seems like she's the only one listening to the leader. Now, to be fair, some of the members of the PNM, I think, have maybe figured out, hey, we're not helping. Maybe we should be a little bit quieter, right? I'm not sure. Maybe, but I'm not sure. Maybe they're not smart enough to figure out what to say next, so they're kind of just trying to figure it out. I don't know. But here's the thing. This is very strategically smart by the PNM to have Jennifer Baptiste-Primus come out and say she's confident that the PNM could recover. She's confident that the leadership of Penelope Beckles can lead the PNM to recover and get back into a politically competitive place. Because right now, it ain't looking so hot. But as she pointed out, most of the voters that didn't vote for the PNM, it's not like you could say they went and switched sides and voted for the UNC. They just did not vote. First of all, that's one thing that the current administration needs to be very aware of. Because if you think about it, if the PNM more or less had the same number of votes that they had the elections gone by, and the UNC had the votes that they had in the last election, at least with regards to the popular votes, this would be a lot closer, right? So there's always the potential for the PNM to make up some ground just automatically. They don't necessarily, they just have to not look as bad as they did last time, and they'll just gain back that ground automatically, right? It's not necessarily going to gain all the ground back, because when your margin of victory was 2 to 3 seats and you lost the 2 seats in Tobago to a third party, you lost it. The UNC did nothing to make you lose it. You lost that all by yourself, right? That means you are going to have to put a lot of effort in. But it doesn't mean that the current government could just sit on its laurels and, just assume that they will win in perpetuity. Because that's what the PNM, to some degree, thought. And look where that got them. But here's the key reason why. That observation is just a minor part of the equation. The real thing is this. What have I been saying about the PNM and their situation? They don't understand, or at least they didn't, maybe they do now, that the current situation is not like when Dr. Keith Rowley had to reform the PNM as the opposition party after Patrick Manning lost the election to the People's Partnership Coalition, right? Because when Dr. Keith Rowley had to do it, he was the dissenting voice. He was the backbencher. So when Manning lost, Rowley didn't lose. Yes, he campaigned for the PNM, but he was, to some extent, he was with the PNM, but he was a dissenting voice. He didn't agree, right, for better or worse. He didn't agree with the policy decisions. He was a man apart, separated, insulated from the political fallout of that. So what happened? The PNM lost, and immediately they cheered, they chanted, they demanded, they wanted Dr. Keith Rowley. That position is very different to where the PNM finds itself now. They were all a part of that election campaign. They weren't separate and insulated from it. Penelope Beckles was a cabinet minister, not a backbencher. She did not graze any dissenting opinions. Yes, behind closed doors, there is reports and rumors that she was the other person and it was an 11-9 split. But the problem is they so successfully presented a united front that she is, at the end of the day, more a part of the machine in that failed re-election campaign than separated from it publicly. More importantly, the people around her. She might have a little bit of an argument to say, well, I was kind of quiet, I wasn't really there like everybody else. But the people around her, they were all there, they were all in. You know, just, I believe Foster Cummins was rattling off PNM like a machine gun, right? That's the meme, right? Yeah, look how well that turned out. And that's the problem. A lot of these vocal people, they lost their seats. They were all in on the previous administration. So they come in now and they want to act like, yes, are we going to join hands with Penny or whatever? Listen, y'all are making her guilty by association at best. But again, she was a cabinet minister. Well, here comes Jennifer Baptiste-Primus. The one real public, I don't agree with this nonsense. And similar to before, the way I don't want to say nonsense, I want to say something else. But can't say it on live TV. She made it clear. She did it respectfully. She didn't kick up a fuss. She didn't walk out. She played it a little bit better than the UNC dissenters, particularly a couple of them, right? But the point is, she was willing, up front, not in hindsight, to say her piece, to point out her disagreement. So she is the closest thing to Dr. Keith Rowley back in 2010. The closest thing. She, unlike the rest of the party executives, say, hey, one of us in this room didn't agree with the nonsense you all tried to pull before that election. One of us has a little bit more credibility, and by a little, I mean probably a lot more credibility with the rest of the country than everybody else in this room. And by publicly endorsing Penelope Beckles, who does have, to some extent, in her history, she has enough to give a little bit, and this is probably why she was chosen. She is from Manning's time. She was set aside initially by the Keith Rowley executive of the PNM. Eventually, they had to call her back. But the point is, she is not fully a Rowley person. And Jennifer Baptiste-Primus now, even though she joined the party when the party was in opposition at that time, because she was willing to give a dissenting voice. Strategically now, she's putting that political capital of, hey, I wasn't in agreement with that, but I agree with this. And she's willing to be upfront. Well, one could argue, is it upfront? I would say yes. She's willing to be upfront about it. She's not waiting to see if Penelope Beckles is able to pull it out of her hat or not. I do wonder how many of the rest of them are kind of waiting to see, is she going to actually be able to do it? We'll give lip service and we believe in her, but will we actually put our mouth and money behind? I don't know. Because in this case, yes, the saying is money where your mouth is, but really and truly right now, it's just mainly talk, right? But to some extent, endorsing someone before the dust settles, that's a test of judgment. It's easy to do things in hindsight with the benefit of being able to see how it turns out, and then you're like, oh yes, I always believe. Really? And the PNM needs more political capital because they don't have much. They don't seem to understand that. They need it. And Jennifer Baptiste-Primus is one of the few people that was able to earn some in the last 6 months. And she's willing to spend it on Penelope Beckles. Well, that just makes me want to take the opposition leader a little bit more seriously and hope that things could stabilize there, because if the opposition falls apart, folks, what's going to happen to the government? There's a higher chance it falls apart. To some extent, that's what happened the last go-around with the Keith Rowley administration and the UNC. The UNC was not a great opposition. Let's not forget that. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, We'll have a few more topics in the daily review. Stay tuned. This is Talking About WSN. Hi, allow me to reintroduce myself. Sean Michael Small here on WSN Talking About. We'll be right back after this.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Struggling with heart health or frequent migraines? Discover the simple steps to reclaim your energy and vitality.
We're diving into a topic that affects about 422 million people around the world: diabetes.
Tune into Wellness Unlocked, the series that delivers expert advice, practical tips, and inspiring stories to help you take control of your health and well-being. Your health matters. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and take the first step toward better health.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
So, I don't like to talk about every murder. It's one of those things. It's never pleasant to talk about people dying. And it's even crazier when you reach a certain age and the average age of the people dying is younger than you. I've said this before. It's one of those things in life that I wasn't ready for, that psychological shift, you know. I'm not necessarily old yet, but I'm old enough where people had less life than I did because theirs was cut short way too soon. And one of the horrible trends now is people are going missing, and essentially you're just hoping that they come back alive, but the hopes more often than not are not good, right? Sometimes, yes, it happens. I think in one case, one lady was kidnapped and she was recovered. In the other case, and this is just the recent cases, she was not, right? Now, 2 people have gone missing, and the problem is, police and Coast Guard are searching for them, but the problem is that I believe bullet casings, spent shell casings were found in their home, some of which bear TTPS markings, right? And in one case, a clump of hair belonging, I believe, to the young lady. I say young lady because she's only in her 30s, 36, which again, you know, she's not that much younger than me, but still, you know, her family fears she is dead. Given what was found at the scene, given the potential violence, 9mm and 5.56. So the 9mm is either pistol or submachine gun. Submachine guns are automatic weapons, potentially. But the 5.56, those generally speaking are used by rifles. That level of firepower. The man in the equation is, I believe, was involved in drugs in the past. Not sure if he still is, right? Sometimes it doesn't matter. If you want to turn over a new leaf, history will come after you. And we don't know for sure exactly what happened. But it's things like this, right, that, I mean, look, missing people, potential gun violence, potential kidnapping, potential murder, and in one case, the missing woman, she wasn't kidnapped. She was murdered and the body was dealt with in the most gruesome manner, disposed of, right, eventually found. Like, I believe it's the father that is not confident his daughter's alive. Do we have to fear that something like that happened in this case, right? And let me be frank. These are not friends or family of mine. Technically speaking, their death will not impact me in any way directly beyond the emotional toll of knowing someone has died, if that is what has happened to them. But it will definitely impact all of us indirectly. Right? Not emotionally. Emotionally, it might impact all of us directly, but practically, physically, there's a lot of indirect trickle-down effects. Yes, this might be one of many cases, but they all add up and they all contribute to the state that we find ourselves in, where arguably I started to wonder this morning, are we just reacting out of fear? And then now, usually, that's not a good thing to do. I'm afraid, so I'm going to react out of fear, off the cusp, at times recklessly, because I don't care about the consequences. I want this solution now, because something has to be done. Something has to be done. And I don't care what the fallout might be and the unintended consequences are. I don't care. That's what happened in El Salvador. The public does not care, for the most part, at least based on what I have read. They don't care if innocent people get caught up in those boxes holding 100 criminals per cell, where it seems as though individual rights and freedoms are essentially suspended. And where you, if you are an innocent person caught up in the wake of that, might end up being locked up with 99 of the most cold-blooded murderers your society, in what was at the time an extremely violent society, has to offer. And now, to what extent are we doing something similar? But we're not doing it with a lock up anybody and throw away the key with little to no due process. That's not our strategy. Our strategy is what the Minister of Defense said. Right? Now, before I get into that, the reason why I wanted to bring up that we're acting out in fear, in part because, hey, doesn't it seem as though there are a lot of missing people cases and we get a lot of bad news? But then the opposition leader, and this ties back to what I was saying before the break, just very slightly though, points out that in her experience, she went to do a conference. I can't remember what it was about. It was, I think it was climate control or green initiatives. Basically, people were saying, part of the diaspora and maybe others, they were fearful of coming back home. Now, I have seen some, I mean, we think about all of the YouTubers that do the whole, they go to crime hotspots in various third world countries and how bad that played out, right? How bad it makes us look. Now, here's the thing. I have seen some travelers, they do the clickbait title and of, you know, they told us don't go to Trinidad and Tobago, but obviously they went to Trinidad and Tobago, they came to Trinidad and Tobago, and they're like, oh, it's so great, right? So they have that, where they play, they use the whole stereotypical fear-mongering thing more like as a way to kind of pull you in, you know? To then kind of like turn that on its head and say it's not quite the case, right? And a lot of content creators do that. But the flip side is I saw one guy, I think he was a musical artist. I don't know if he was Jamaican or American or African. But he was like, and I guess he went to certain areas and kind of got a real taste of the criminal underbelly. Not enough that he was involved in anything, but enough that he could see some of the worst of it, where he basically said, oh, it's different here. The violence is different here. I don't know how old it was, but it really did paint us in a bad light. And this was not one of those crime YouTubers. He was doing an interview. And he was basically saying, oh, things here, there's a different level of violence. We don't play. And it makes me wonder, you know, I mean, I don't know to what extent his opinion is valid or an exaggeration. I don't know. But I think it's something that we should acknowledge. Forget about disagreeing with it. Why bother disagreeing with it? It doesn't matter if you disagree with what foreigners think of us or what we may even think about ourselves. When people say that they think this is the case, it's not about whether they're right or wrong sometimes. Sometimes it's more important to ask why. So, the opposition leader pointed out, right, that the latest push for self-defense laws, controversial rhetoric, she's calling for more caution, for more measured and systemic approach, right? Because what works in the States might not work here, right? She said it's not resulted in what the US expected. You have developed a situation where people just feel that for any situation you're going to shoot, right? And with our smaller population, how do we compare to their scale and the dynamics of their population, of their culture, right? And she herself is warning that the words of the Minister of Defense, Wayne Sturge, could lead to dangerous outcomes. And it's making me, this is where I thought maybe the government is willing to do this because they understand people are afraid and they will act out of fear. And I don't know if it's a combination of they want to give the people what they think they want. That could be part of it. But also maybe they themselves don't necessarily know what else to do. But to what extent are we going to respond in a way that, again, I'm not necessarily concerned about there's a criminal there and you're overly aggressive with the criminal. Like, I can't fault people. I won't necessarily agree with it, at least not 100%. But when people say take the gloves off, right? We're in a situation when the murder rate is really high, people are fearful, and they want criminality to feel, to suffer consequences. So if it is a shoot first and ask questions later, most of us are not going to give it the same consideration as we would if the situation was different, right? I'll still give it some consideration because I don't want, you know, the rule of law and the rights of individuals to just be thrown away because that's too risky for everybody. But I will understand if most of the population is like, oh, a criminal got shot and died. Well, that's a shame. Moving on. Because normal people are seemingly dying every day now and have been for quite some time. When you have 600 murders, on average, that's 2 a day every year, right? 1.5 to 2 a day. So someone is dying basically every day. Yes, there's mass shooting, so it's not always 1 a day, right? I understand that. So, but there's the other cases where it's not a criminal that potentially is going to get shot because he was doing the wrong thing. What about the neighbor's child that came to get his ball? What about the mentally handicapped person that's just wandering around? What about the old person that might be looking to ask you for something, so they're coming up to your house? Because back in the day, that's what we did. We just walked into the house to knock on the door or some nonsense like that, right? Or ring the bell. But not everybody has a bell, right? As I said yesterday, what if it's kids that's wanting to cut across your field in order to get to the beach because you're in a rural area? I mean, one of those things did happen. A mentally handicapped person allegedly knocked on the door of a police officer. I can't remember if it's SRP or not. Knocking on the door put a police officer, gave him so much fear. Oh my gosh, there's somebody knocking on the door. That must mean that they're here to kill me. That's where we've reached as a society. That knocking on a door, well, this is based on reports. I don't know if there was more to it or not. Maybe it was how he was knocking on the door or not. But still, even if you're aggressively knocking on the door, we've reached a point where that's a threat. So then what? Ringing someone's bell will be what? That will be on the level of, okay, well, I could give you a warning for that. But if you reach to my front door, then all bets off. But again, it goes back to what the Minister of Defense said. He said, essentially, it is better to err on the side of caution if you think that it's fake police. And in this case, the caution is not try and figure it out and be careful that you shoot at potential police officers out of fear. No, it is shoot at them. And as, you know, retired and current police media ambassadors have spoken to me about, what happens if it is real police officers and they feel threatened because you're shooting at them, so they shoot back? There's a very good chance that you're not going to win that gunfight. But the sad part is, if it is actual police officers, it more likely than not will be an unnecessary gunfight that you initiated. So then now, and this is why body cameras are so important, and this is why I took issue with the Minister of Homeland Security saying bulletproof vests over body cameras. You need body cameras to ensure that there's physical evidence to show that if something like this happens, because your government is setting this up to potentially happen, to show that the police responded to someone shooting at them. And then in that case, what is the family supposed to say? Officer, Your Honor, they shot and killed my son, but he shot at them first. Well, he thought they were fake cops. Well, unfortunately, he should have shown better judgment. And this is one of the things where, ironically, we're debating on what's reasonable, what's not reasonable. But ironically, the government, in trying to kind of make the burden of judgment easier on the everyday person, is potentially going to put them in situations where a judge is not really going to have a lot of leeway. And if you rewrite the laws, in order to try to compensate for that, you might put us in even a larger hole. You shoot at real police because you're afraid. Where does it end? Because as somebody pointed out, now the criminals might potentially, I believe this could be Gideon Dixon. Gideon Dixon is asking for the Minister of Defense, and he's also Minister in the Ministry of Homeland Security, so he has the authority to speak on internal matters. This is Wayne Sturge on those grounds, right? He's saying the statement has the potential to arm the criminally intended and their associates with a ready-made defense, or to attack bona fide law enforcement officers when executing their lawful duties, for example, search, maintenance, and first instance warrants, etc. So this is Gideon Dixon. He has a point, because what could happen? Well, someone could shoot at the police shoot back. Then the public, of course, if the civilian who shot at the police dies because he thought they were fake cops, there will be an uproar. Then what are we going to do? Are we going to put things in law to protect people shooting at the police? Then even more than what Mr. Dixon says, they will have a ready-made defense and further protections in the law. So we're setting up a situation where the law now, what are we going to prioritize? In what circumstance? The rights of the individual to protect themselves, or the rights for the police not to get shot at? Because the minister said, well, go ahead and shoot if you think that they're fake. And again, this makes me wonder, is this just essentially a fair response? Because ideally, there is nothing going on. At least, look, we know that there's corruption with politicians. We just don't know who. We know that there's corruption in the police service. We just don't know who, right? Although to some extent, some of the officers might know or suspect which one of their fellow officers are dirty. We know that there's corruption in prison service. Oh, we know there's corruption in prison service because it's ridiculous, right? And in all of those cases, the politicians who are corrupt, the police officers who are corrupt, the prison officers who are corrupt, and other members in Homeland Security. There was at least one case, I can't remember what it was, but somebody in Homeland Security got arrested for some nonsense or the other, right? But I think that was more of a white-collar thing, misappropriation of funds, not actual taking bribes and running cover for gangs. But maybe they are involved in that stuff, you know? We don't know. But anyway, what the corrupt don't understand is they are making the rest of us vulnerable by compromising their own situations and their own sisterhoods, brotherhoods, and communities, right? From the legislatures to the police officers to the prison officers. And then that trickles down to us. They just think, well, oh gosh, what's the harm? Things are bad. I'm just taking my slice. Yeah, but you are growing the situation further. And then we get where the problem seems too big and we have to use extraordinary measures. Because the opposition leader pointed out, a state of emergency, it's not, one of the things she pointed out is it really going to solve the issue? Now, here's the thing. I will say this. It's no worse of a decision than when the PNM did a state of emergency. Let's be clear. And surprisingly, it could be correlation, but the results weren't that bad of the state of emergency we had at the beginning of the year. So maybe this will help somewhat. It's just that when you look at the murders in the press and the kidnappings in the press and the missing person reports, it's really hard to feel confident that things are improving, right? But are we responding in fear? Because a state of emergency, it's to compensate, in my opinion, for deficient laws. A stand your ground law is what? It's to compensate for our poor response times, as well as the deficiencies in criminal investigation and prosecution. The detection rate for murders is at times less than 20%, I think even potentially less than 10% at times. So we're overcompensating for these things. And I fear that it is out of fear. Because yes, 600 murders is a lot. Oakland has, I think, 8 to 900,000 people. 100 murders for them a year is a big deal. Now, we have 50% more people, but 6 times as many murders? It's a very big deal. But we ain't reached the point of Guatemala yet. We ain't reached the point where judges are dying every week, and prosecutors are dying every day, and police officers are dying, in bunches. We ain't reached that point. We had the threat that caused the SOE, but again, it's one of those things where we probably won't necessarily see evidence that it exists, so we have to take the word for it. And it could be intelligence and fears and suppositions and assumptions, and to some extent, you don't want it to actually take place, right? So it's just one of those catch-22s. How much are we going to believe in the threat without evidence to say that it was a practical reality coming down the pipe? But my point is, we're not there yet. We're still basically dealing with relatively normal types of crime. That is to say, the type of crime is the crime that you see every day. Our issue is not the type of crime per se, except for the mass shootings. That's a little bit getting to beyond the pale territory. The problem is the amount. You'll never totally eliminate murders and drug smuggling and all of that jazz, but you could control it, confine it, restrict it, minimize the impact as much as possible. There will always be somebody that slips through the cracks and wants to make a quick buck, but you want to catch as many as you can, punish as many as you can, and say, hey, all your criminals need to be the ones acting cautiously, need to be the ones on the back foot all the time, need to be the ones looking over your shoulder and running scared at even the hint of a police officer. That's not the case right now, is it? It's the scale and scope of crime that is an issue, the amount of murders, the amount of corruption. Normal laws are supposed to be able to deal with it. And the fact that they can't We have to ask the questions, why? And this goes back to yesterday, Mr. Stanford, I was saying, what about solutions? Listen, I could talk about having drones and new technology till the cow come home. We need another forensic lab. Yeah, what's the point if at the end of the day we have serious deficiencies in the judiciary and in prosecution, and even in just getting enough evidence to arrest a suspect? What's the point of having new gadgets if the laws that are supposed to be the foundation of how we arrest and charge people and gather evidence in order to convict them justly, rightly, fairly? You broke the law. We have evidence that you broke the law. We didn't doctor this. We didn't make this up. So when we convict you and lock you away and throw away the key, no one could say that it was unfair. It was very fair. And that's how it's supposed to be done. And for whatever reason, it seems like we could barely do this. When the fact that the people in Building 13 are technically on remand, how long are they supposed to be on remand? That murder case was how long ago? And that's just to show you the serious deficiencies in the system, the inabilities in the system. And what is the current administration looking to do about it? They potentially are proving that at a time when we need exceptional leaders, and we just spent potentially 10 years with average Joes, acting like average citizens, just doing the average stuff. Don't get me wrong, I honestly think that people like Imbert are very, very capable politicians when it comes to their internal party politics. Because being in a political party is a cutthroat environment, and there are a lot of casualties, rhetorically speaking, along the way. And the people that we see in cabinet are the ones who successfully make their way to the top, whether it's because of their family, because of their finances, or because of whatever. But once you actually get into governance, now it's different, and far too many of them, it's amateur hour. We had one Minister of Finance in the past that didn't know what the word audit means. You have a current Minister of Finance that doesn't know what the word diversification means. Minister of Finance, by the way, ain't talking about, oh, the minister of some arbitrary thing doesn't know what the word audit means. We ain't talking about that. We're talking about the person who actually supposedly deals with numbers. Supposedly deals with the economy and doesn't understand the basic concept of diversification. So now we're in a complex situation, and we need great people to step up and lead in a great way. In part one, in order to manage our expectations, communicate complex issues to us so that we could understand why they have to make difficult decisions, critical decisions that are not always going to be easy for us to accept, because security is always a compromise for freedom. Freedom is always a compromise to society. That is an equation that modern governments have to deal with. In the past, the king would just say, I want it so, and the rest of us would have suck salt. But that's not how we live now. We're in a democracy. We have certain expectations, certain rights. We want these things. But in order to have them, it requires a certain level of maturity, and we're not getting that out of our leadership. What I fear we're getting is essentially, well, we already know what to do, you know. So you know what? We'll put it on you. We'll put the responsibility on you because it might be too much for us to bear. And I'm not saying that the PNM is better because they didn't propose these things and oppose the implementation of these things. Because their idea was to just, well, I don't need a crime plan. That's what the commissioner's for. I could just sit in this chair and look pretty. That was the Minister of National Security in the previous administration. Very effective leadership. The confidence level of a certain section of the population went through the roof when they heard that. It's just that the problem was it was the criminals whose confidence level went through the roof. Because the trust and confidence in national security did not do their job rose. So now, what do we have? We do have a Minister of Homeland Security that is, at least in his words, saying he wants more resources. He wants more things for his police. They're trying to get more police, but the SRPs at the end of the day, including them into the main police force, to what extent does that really solve your manpower issue, right? It helps, but what if we had a larger police force while also having the SRPs? Wouldn't that technically have been better? But even if having more police and having more visible police and a larger police presence, it could suppress crime. But the criminal enterprise has grown to a point where you could suppress it all you want. It's not gone. The situation with America, the drug cartels that are operating in Mexico, they're just going to switch to Canada. Now, maybe with the tariffs and border control in Canada, it might upset their plans, but I've seen it. Somebody interviewed some of the gangsters in Mexico. They just said, look, we'll just kind of wait it out. He's only there for 4 years, and we've put things in place to move our stuff to Canada because the border controls between Canada and the United States are a lot weaker than between Mexico and the United States. Because they're transnational, baby. This is big business. And let's not mix any matters. It's big business here in TNT. International crime uses us as their highway to a significant part of the globe. That's why you're confiscating drugs in Portugal and you're involved in the TTPS. So it's not just street hoodlums and pests that we have to deal with in this situation. And I don't know to what extent stuff is being done. I do think that the new commissioner is a step in the right direction, selecting him, someone who supposedly has the trust and confidence of our foreign law enforcement partners. But one step, a whole journey does not make. One ingredient, a whole recipe does not make. One move, a whole strategy does not make. One policy, a whole government does not make. Stand your ground ain't going to solve everything. It's going to maybe impact street. And this is the other thing. I believe Karen said it. I haven't looked into it myself, but I won't be surprised if to some extent this is true, especially given the deficiencies that we have. You see, to some degree, where cities in America that implemented these things, they don't have the same kind of investigative deficiencies and prosecution deficiencies and legal deficiencies that we do. But we have these things. We'll stand your ground, end crime. FULs are tied to the stand your ground policy, right? John Murphy says he could defend his house with a broomstick if you know what you're doing. And more than getting a gun, perhaps the ability to stand your ground, you really need to kind of know what you're doing. Perhaps the real business is to have self-defense instructors, not just to kind of give you some karate lessons. Forget that. Karate ain't the answer. But rather practical fighting lessons, one, and two, how to secure your house, how to defend your house, whether you have a gun or not. Because you could have a gun and you're saying, I'm going to defend my house, and you walk out big and bad, and you get gunned down because you didn't know what you're doing. So having the legal right to do something doesn't mean you're going to be good at it. And this is a fight. This is a confrontation. This is a conflict. You could lose. They will just come 6 men, 8 men deep. I know in one case, they took a car. You saw the hijacker. You didn't see the 3 guys in the backup vehicle around the corner who were probably all armed as well in case anything went wrong. They're ready to back up the boy. If you want now, if you're thinking it's going to be a 1-on-1, no, it's going to be a 4-on-1. You ready for that? All of a sudden, legal guns will be used in the perpetration of crimes, yes, because they'll be taken from their owners when they lose those gunfights potentially. Or they'll be targeted just to get the guns and the ammunition in some cases. All right. Wow, some of these things, I didn't think I had so much to say about them, but it is what it is. I understand the visceral reactions, but we do have to temper it with good policy decisions. And as I was alluding to, we'll open up the phone lines now. You can call in and have your say. We might go a little bit, well, we kind of go over time anyway, but, you know, we could take some calls. I know that some people might disagree with the basic premise of what I said, but you kind of have to look at it in its entirety. Because again, we could talk about solutions, right? Obviously, we need the thing is, look at it this way. For standing ground to in part, we need the body cameras because of what the Minister of Defense said, right? And then now, there'll probably be other legal ramifications that if we see certain scenarios, how will they play out and what judges have to consider in the courts. So one of the things is, rather than trying to deal with all the symptoms, because there's 1,000,001, what about the root cause? And that is the political inadequacy and the lack of societal/political will in order to get certain things done. We have a money line. We'll take the call. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Morning, Sean.
Morning.
Now, I want to back up what San Fernando said yesterday about solution, right?
Yes.
I want to back him up. And from now on, whenever I call, I'm going to give you one or two. So I starting today. I'm giving you the first one. Okay?
Yeah.
Nice. So, I looking at the economic development of Trinidad and Tobago. Because I find for the past 25 years, the kind of money where we spend, we ain't seeing it. And our we ain't really seeing it. Now, the last Prime Minister, he had a top-down approach. He was looking at the aesthetics. He talking about swimming pool, community center, library, yeah, taking the Martin to borough status and all that. Nothing wrong with that. But that's third gear. He had to deal with the first gear. And the first gear is the basic thing that the citizens really want. A reliable water supply, proper drainage, housing, even solar power and food security. They're the basics that the citizens were looking for and we ain't getting. So my first solution is this, because this affected me directly. I am the holder of a certificate of comfort from the government. I applied for this in 1998. I got it from Minister Munilal when he was Minister of Housing in 2012. And to date, I am still waiting on the government to come back to me to talk about a lease. So the deal is this. It's time the government get up and look to lease state land to all the residents who live on it. Whether you have a certificate of comfort or not, you bring everybody up to that standard and lease them in. You could put the surveying costs and the cost for the documents, the legal costs, together with the cost for the land and get them some kind of payment plan to pay for it. What this will do, it will improve the standard of living of and the quality of life of we the citizens. That's the first thing it will do. Because it can help you create generational wealth to leave something for your children. The second thing it will do is reduce poverty in this country. Because in case you don't know, that 20,000 people who go home, yeah, it come like when Hitler put some Jews into Auschwitz and they just wipe them off there. Because these people have to live. And if that is their main source of income, what are they left to do? I want you all journalists to ask Minister Panara that. What are these people expected to do? Because all of them can't go on the highway and sell water. Right?
Mm-hmm.
The third reason why that is important, it will raise revenue for the government, which the government needs. It will raise revenue for the government. Because everybody will be able to pay all the money at once. So let's say the total cost comes to $40,000. They give people every, say, 5 years payment plan per month. So who could pay all, who could pay some, who could pay an installment. That way, when you talk about property tax or land and building tax, for the services that you get, you could justify that. Because in the village where I live, when I came here, it was wooden shacks. Today it ain't so. They might have 2 wooden houses. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody has, well, all the services came in. And that was through Ms. Camille Robinson Regis for the MP for Aruka South. Because we were Aruka South at the time. Then we come to W. O'Meara now with Malabar Mausika. So in my village, you get roads, drains, lights, water, electricity, cable. The only thing remaining is the lease for the land. And PNM has been keeping this population in a state of suspended animation where that is concerned. Because the last Prime Minister, he didn't like squatters. But he expected squatters to vote for him. With him nonsense with community center. People can't get water in the house. Other people places flooding out. But you want the proper swimming pool. Sean, and I want to add to, we have to come up with a mechanism to tax the self-employed people in this country. You know? Because we have some self-employed people who making $15,000, $20,000 and $50,000 a month. They're not paying a cent in income tax. You know? But when they get all the one pension, the one free healthcare, the one free education for the children, and all the other benefits that come with it, well, watch me. You need a government with testicular fortitude to tell the citizens, hey, this democratic socialism we're practicing here. Some of the freeness had to stop, you know. All right? So, I'm following up on San Fernando. I'm giving you a solution by the day. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. So, I think what happened is that I appreciate the want for solutions. The problem is twofold. One, and I'll speak directly on your propositions just now, but so that people could hopefully understand where I'm coming from. The problem is twofold. One, a lot of these solutions aren't going to go anywhere if the people from the top don't agree with it, buy into it, want to implement it, right? And more often than not, too much of the population is more than willing to ignore the problem and just demand the government fix it. If the government is going to be the ones, and as opposed to we have a problem, they're not fixing it, so we will make our displeasure known and basically potentially undermine the government in the sense of you're losing popular support, not undermine in the sense that you're breaking the law. But you're losing popular support. Can you maintain your government? Because in theory, what would happen is if the public displeasure is known well in advance of an election, the various members of the government who are not in charge, they'll be looking at their careers. And they'll be saying, hey, maybe we need to not agree with our leader because he's leading us off the deep end. That's kind of to some extent what happened to Mr. Manning. Some people were willing to say it up front. Other people, they kind of too Brutus themselves, you know, afterwards. And I'm not talking about Amory Brown. That's a different situation, right? On that remark. That was a shot at somebody else. He knows who he is, if he's hearing this. So we don't have that. So they just kind of sit pretty, and too many people, they complain that politicians do nothing, but then they still depend on them to fix it, to implement the fixes, to determine what the fixes should be. They don't even want to listen to other citizens who have ideas. So part of what needs to change, I think, is how the population engages with these situations. And in part, an example of that is Mr. San Fernando's on the line, and I'll say it. He thought, hey, what if those 100,000 voters spoil their ballot? And I'm saying, yes, I agree with that, because people need to understand they need to be more involved, and they need to be willing to express themselves and not be socialist programs make you dependent. You don't want to be politically incorrect and go afoul of the political directorate, so you censor yourself and we get what we get. I mean, that's to be very simplistic. But we have Mr. San Fernando waiting, so we take the call and continue afterwards. Mr. San Fernando, good morning.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning, morning.
And I know I have to say good morning to two other people. Good morning, Arima, and good morning, Dawadi. Now, Sean, that suggestion that Arima gave about probably to tax these people who make this money and don't contribute.
Yeah.
Okay, and you know, when this revenue authority that was supposed to be implemented by the previous administration, you know, that was one of the things that I was trying to figure out. And I never said, I'm so glad that Darima has said it. That there are some people in this country who just decided they're going to have a free ride. And one of the issues with that is we have to start with the NIS. Why it is that people have to understand that if you want, we should be implement a system. If you want to get a pension when you reach 60 or 65, then whether irrespective of the fact that if you're not in the what you call it, the mainstream system where you have a job and that company pays the taxes and stuff, self-employed people who selling water should be able to contribute to a national insurance scheme.
Mm-hmm.
They should be able to do that. And I don't know why it is that the powers that be, the people in the NIS, don't come up with these suggestions to the state and say, this is what we need to do, because people have to start to contribute to get something later on. That is just the fact, because we are in the NIS running out of money and all kind of crap. Now, that's not what I called to talk about this morning, Sean. What I really wanted to talk about is Tobago. Have you ever seen or heard of any master plan for Tobago, Sean?
No.
And let me tell you where I'm coming from with that, right? Tobago is of a particular size. And has a certain amount, a particular size with a particular size of population, so landmass and population size. They are trying to become a hotshot tourist destination, but you have limitations because of the size of the island. And I've tried to look for it, and actually this morning I have to call the EMA about it to find out if there is any environmental impact assessment for Tobago as a whole, in terms of if it is that, and our master plan saying, if it is that you want to bring in the next 20 years, you want to be able to have 500,000 visitors a year or 1 million visitors a year, then this is the impact it's going to have on the beaches. This is the impact it's going to have on our sewer system. This is the impact it's going to have on your water supply. And I think we're not planning on a macro level, and including Trinidad, for these type of issues, but particularly with Tobago, because it is a more sensitive environment because of its size and the type of business that they engage in. And I think it's time at the THA try to, I know there's, Vanessa James has some data, but the data doesn't take into consideration all what I'm speaking about here. Yeah. But we need to have see a master plan for Tobago. How these, because it's ad hoc. We see a new airport going in. They say it could take 3 million people for the year, right? They want to put in a marina. They have these things that they want to do. I see the minister was there. The Minister of Energy. They're talking about giving them easing up the licensing for them to export materials for the quarry. These are things that happen in silos, and this is what should form part of this whole master plan for Tobago, which I would hope Mr. Augustine and they would listen and hear and try to develop and get everybody on board. Because you have a master plan, this is a master plan for Tobago, this is a master plan for TTP or TPP. It's a master plan for Tobago. Get everybody involved and come up with a plan for Tobago, and so then you would know we really can't go for this 1 million tourists a year. No. This is what's going to happen if we do that. That is where we need, I think Tobago needs to go. Have a good day, Sean.
Thank you, caller. Now, first of all, what I've been saying all the time, political will, all that stuff, you need to have that to have a master plan. But let's just move past that. That is very correct. Why? Because having a plan would have said, this is what our situation is, this is where we want to go, this is how we're going to get there. Trying to take shortcuts like going from the old airport to the new airport where the capacity is supposedly potentially so much greater for 3 million people, when we don't even see 100,000 tourists coming to Tobago a year, from what I understand, it's in the tens of thousands, annually. Annually, that's where it reached. Back in the day, there were a lot more foreign tourists, and they came through that little humble airport that already existed. So the amount of effort spent on a new airport, which is not even open, right? Which is not even operating, but it was opened, but it's not open, right? And the fact that we don't have the industry ready to support that amount of traffic, the infrastructure like water and power to support that amount of traffic. Now, water and power could probably support a lot more visitors to the island, but could it support 3 million, right? Tobago has a lot to offer for such a small island. It has a lot to offer, but does it have a big enough everything to meet the ambitions of some of these projects? So what about the marina? And when you kind of do these things in silos and then they fail, not only is it a waste of money, but then it's an excuse. You see, we tried a thing and it didn't work. No, you tried a thing stupidly. Of course it didn't work. And if you don't include it in your planning, because we didn't need a full $3 million airport. Maybe, arguably, what you could have said is, we need a new airport. So this is the airport project, and it will start like this, and we will utilize the new terminal and the old terminal, or whatever, or this is what we will do to prepare the island for the new terminal, and do that first. But no, politicians want their vanity projects, as opposed to actually wanting to solve problems. So that's why I say the political side needs to be fixed, right? But also, who is doing the planning? They have to do the planning. They themselves don't know how to do it. So part of it is that the population kind of needs to take tourism more seriously, for the politicians to potentially take tourism more seriously. But even then, the Dutch disease situation is very real, right? But I think it can be done. I think it can be done, right? But I think the first step is, one, actually looking to sit down, do an assessment and plan. And then two, based on the plan, market the island. And start with what we already have in place to get more visitors and to get up to what is the Tobago brand, because the steel pan was invented here, and yet that does not help our tourism any which way. Bob Marley helps Jamaican tourism all the time, but the inventors of the steel pan cannot necessarily, as a nation, profit on their own invention. The rest of the Caribbean does, but not us. We're the ones that profit the least. Sorry, we have Shogunas and Trinity on the line. We take Shogunas first. Good morning, caller, you on the air.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
I have listened to this thing about Columbus, and I don't understand it at all. I don't know what is Columbus sin.
Yeah.
People blame him for slavery and all this thing. Those things were a donkey years before Columbus. What I know Columbus did, and I always say, that you have to judge people's action at the time it was done. You can't put today morality on 2,000 years ago, right? At the time, the major trade route was from Europe going to India. And the Arabs and them blocked the trade route and make it too dangerous. And they were looking for an alternative way. And that is when people came up with the idea that the rule was wrong. Other people scoffed them. And that is when Columbus went. And there is no question that the majority of people in the old world was unaware of the new world. And Columbus brought this, so I don't understand. As regards reparation, I had to blame you for this. Because sometime last year, I think it was, you were supposed to initiate a discussion on reparation. And it never came off. Now the people who put slavery and sell all these slaves to the African people, why do we want to pay them? No, I can't understand the logic of it. And I have always stated that when slavery started, it was a good thing. Because previous to that, when they had a little tribal wars, the women side would kill out all the men on the other side. Slavery stopped all that. Any questions or queries or anything?
No, it's just, look, you can't put the whole thing about reparations on me. That is bigger than me.
No, all I'm saying, You were supposed to have a discussion. The discussion never came up. That's all I say.
Well, part of it, Professor, is I don't think until reparations is defined, the discussion is kind of meaningless because it will just be an emotional discussion on whether we want it or not. So which, and this is what I said yesterday, how could I want or not want a thing if you can't tell me exactly what it is?
But you had the same sort of logic with this union business. You just like to bash union.
No, because listen, we saw how unions generally operated. I didn't bash all. I bashed some, like the PSA.
You ask the methodology. And a union job is to see after its workers.
Yes, but they're not seeing after their workers.
They are.
No, they're not. No, they're not.
The point that you all making.
No, they're not.
Is they're getting too much.
Sorry. The unions are looking after their workers. They're just doing it in a very inefficient way.
So the employers doing it in a better way?
Well, the fact of the matter is, if the unions promote an unhealthy entity and then want to complain when the public is ready to restructure that entity, I mean, were they doing a good job? When the unions are defending people who are not...
Why the union is overdoing it is because the employer is not doing their own.
Well, to some extent that's true.
To government.
To some extent that's true. And it goes back to what I've been saying. You gotta solve the political will.
Extent. That is it. Because the government have ministers who are supposed to see that the work is carried out. They have a minister in each ministry, and none of them do the work.
Yeah.
You know that?
Yeah.
Maybe one minister will do the work.
Caller, we have to go because we have another call waiting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll respond to the Columbus thing because I don't know. Like we might as well just blame Adam for everything that went wrong then, because if it wasn't for him, things wouldn't exist. But I'll explain why I say that afterwards. We have Trinity on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here. Caller, good morning.
Hello, morning, Sean.
Morning.
Morning to the listeners in Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah, you hear me, Claire?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I just want to make some contributions with regards to the person who was talking about planning for Tobago. We have a problem in Trinidad and Tobago in terms of planning, all right, and following through on the plans.
Mm-hmm.
I would like proper planning for tourism in Tobago, and the plan has to change over time to suit the needs of the people and to suit the infrastructure. We would like a lot of proper planning in terms of housing and development and water supplies and power supplies and so on. But there are a lot of us, there are citizens in our country who are not in tune with planning and they don't want planning.
Yeah.
And planning must be based on their ability to influence policy for their own personal pockets for their private company.
Yep.
And that is a hurdle that we have to overcome, that the ordinary citizen doesn't seem to recognize or can pinpoint. Planning in terms of tourism and marina, a project in Tobago for tourism is always based on somebody's or a conglomerate's personal policy that can influence either the THO or the government to suit their pocket, not necessarily the needs of the people of Tobago. And that is what we have to. That is what we need to watch. That is what we have to start, exposing to the public. Right? I have a lot of planning taking place, right? And then when we put something on paper, we decide we're going to plan this in terms of either housing or water infrastructure, anything in Trinidad and Tobago, right? There will always be an obstacle, and that obstacle was set up by private citizens who want to institute a sort of a process for their own personal development. And that is a worldwide problem. And that is, that is a problem not only, it's a problem in the Caribbean and North America. So that is my contribution. Have a good day and stay safe.
Thank you, caller. Yeah, I fully believe what you're saying, and that's one of the things, again, if we don't solve that, then wanting to implement solutions is going to be an uphill battle at best. Now, like places in Canada, the States, Europe, what happens? Yeah, you'll get the intention of having a holistic plan, but personal interests will at times then you know, a lot more behind the scenes nibble away at it, you know? Hey, but what if we don't put this bridge here? What if we put it there? Because it'll benefit me. And, you know, it'll be almost the same thing. And then eventually, decisions will be made that are less efficient, that will cost more, but it'll benefit whoever, however. So we say, it's fine, right? And then when you add it up, the corruption bill, because that is basically what it is, corruption, will start to be insurmountable. We have a caller? We have Jacob Martin on the line. I'll continue on this, but after the call, and yes, I will speak about the Columbus thing since it was brought up. But Jacob Martin first, good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Hi, good morning, Mrs. Small.
Morning.
Yes, all I have to make a comment here, what Arima said was a good idea. I want to be housing and so on. But the only problem with that is that in the past we have seen that once you give people to pay on terms, you see what happened, they start owing by millions and millions. The only solution to that, what they could do, is the government has to put a standing order in the bank, and then from the time they get a salary, they pull out their money. And that's the only way they will solve that problem of people owing money over a length of time. And I mean, it could be a small amount of money make them pay, but people have to have responsibility in balancing their salary with to maintain themselves every month. And that's the only way that will work, because the government will be assured of something they're getting, and money would not be piling up on top of money. As far as the standard ground situation is concerned, people who have never been held up or robbed or have a gun pointed at them would not know the seriousness of this. And I would never own a gun. I've never applied for one. But the fact remains, because I used to do my martial arts, and that helped me a lot. And that helped me in 3 robberies where I disarmed all 3 of them. And only the last one year that I helped, well, I was at my 60s, so when a gun was pointed at me and I was robbed, and my son was in the vehicle, I didn't want to take a chance to try to disarm the person, because he might pull the trigger and hit my son, so I left it. I gave them somebody followed me from the bank. I went to take out a set of money to pay workers. I was doing some construction at my home, and I believe that came from the bank. So you have to be involved in this, because once you get somebody enter your house, not on the outside or anything, you can always look through your window and see what is happening on the outside. But once somebody breaks into your house, there's no asking them what is there. They don't come and ask you, good afternoon or good evening or good night. Could you tell me where you have the cashes? Avoid I'm killing you. It don't go like that. From the time anybody enter your house, you don't enter it for any sense but to rob you or just to kill you to get what you have. So that is things to be taken into consideration. And the next is, not everybody is going to have a gun, because a lot of people would not be able to afford to purchase a gun.
Yeah,
and then, you know, we need to watch all those things. People who will get guns mostly will be businessmen and people who carry about large sums of money and so on. And I don't think there is a big issue with that. The government, I think, is trying. After the budget is read, then you will see some action start in place. And everybody have to understand that. You have to give them a chance to let them go ahead of their going, and they will solve all these problems. It needs a little painstaking for a lot of people who have been let go from their jobs and so on. They're going to tell you how long they're waiting. You know, so people have to understand that. But I understand the situation with the sleeper workers, because they are really people who just work fortnightly and depend on money to pay their bills and sustain their family. So the government should take that into consideration. I heard they say they were paying them. I don't know how true that is. But hopefully that will be addressed sooner than later than 6 months, because it's difficult for anybody to go 1 month without a salary and, you know, things. So Sean, thank you for taking my call, and you have a good day.
Thank you, caller. Good to hear from you again, Mr. Digger Martin. Now, I'll say this. I understand when they give the government a chance because they're operating under the previous budget. They have to have a new budget that's coming up. We can criticize them, similar to how I would always say we could criticize the then PNM administration for how they manage things in the constraints of the external pressures and shocks and negative factors coming from outside. We still could criticize them for how they manage things within that framework. It's similar to this. To some extent, how they're managing things with the constraints of operating under the former PNM administration budget. It's not always necessarily agreeable, and it potentially is making the situation worse. I'll just say this, it's not just about affording the gun, it's also about affording the bullets to practice marksmanship. It don't make sense having a gun if you can't hit anything, then you'll just die in the gunfight. Shotguns ain't that easy to handle, right? So just putting that out there if people think, oh, I'll just get a shotgun. And yeah, the willingness to engage in a fight, and you might not always get the chance to have a fair enough fight. It might be like your situation where they get the drop on you, your children are there. Are you gonna, even if you have a gun, are you gonna risk drawing the gun and engaging in a fight? That police officer lost his life. His girlfriend or wife, I can't remember if she was his wife or girlfriend, could have been hit. She was in front of him. It was a very reckless decision what he did, the police officer that died in the gunfight in the restaurant. But we have Maraval on the line. I think this should be the last call. There's a lot to respond to that I do want to get out before we close the show. But Maraval, good morning. You on there?
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
I would like to do this standing wrong business because I don't like a gun. I never like a gun. I never even see a gun who I see it on movies and all these things.
Yes.
But for me, I would buy one. I want to buy one for my household, right? But some people who have business, some people who have like going, they have money and thing and they're going. These people holding me up all over the place. Look, I remember my cousin. She got killed because she was walking home a day, like walking home from work, and the person killed her. Up to now, we never know who is this person. Look, 2 weeks ago, they hold up my son and take his car. What you supposed to do when people doing this thing? Some people just get fed up of this country. A little place like Trinidad have all these killing. And I think people right now, people getting fed up of people just walking into your place, killing you, and then taking everything you have and walking out, and there's no justice for the people who get robbed, who get killed, who get... I remember a few years ago, when these 5 little babies, there was some big stinking men went in the people's house and killed these 5 little children. What these children do you?
Yeah.
So I think people just get fed up and disgust of all the killing and nothing happening. It has to stop somewhere. Something has to start and something has to stop, because if you keep on letting people walk into your house and doing what they want, raping your children, raping your wife, and they don't even tell anybody now. They have a stop for these, I don't know what to call these people. I don't want to get off air on these people. But it's people getting crazy, people getting very frustrated. You know, I remember a few years ago when they'd have a mother and a daughter. They raped this little girl, they raped the mother, and this little girl, like, she went crazy, never hear nothing about it again. You know, so it's time for something to stop, or start somewhere and stop somewhere. I am sorry, I agree with the people. Not everybody will want a gun in the house. Not everybody will deserve a gun. You're supposed to go through a process to get a gun. If they find you some kind of different person, they don't give you. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. I think here's the thing, and we'll start from the latest and try and work our way back a little bit. Here's the thing. I understand people are fed up and they want the chance to defend themselves, but think about why they're fed up. They're fed up not because, well, they kill me, so I want to kill them back. They're fed up, as you said, or at least part of what you said, no justice, right? Crime happens, we want justice. Justice helps then de-incentivize crime because there are consequences. Here's the thing. Usually what the politicians do, psychology says, don't have a positive campaign, have a negative campaign. Look at America, look at Canada, look at all the other places, right? That's what we do as well. We have a negative campaign. It's not about how good we are. To some extent, look, we don't even know how to do that. Stuart Young tried to say what good things they did, and it came across as very arrogant, self-serving, and tone deaf, right? We don't know how to do positive. We know how to do negative. So we know how to tell you who to blame for it. Just don't blame me. And to some extent, I don't know if this is intentional, but it can unintentionally come across like this. What is the current government stand your ground policy telling you to do? Don't blame us for the crime situation, blame the criminals. And on the surface, that seems correct, right? Criminals are responsible for crime, so you blame them. But criminals are not responsible for managing the country. And I did say this up to a point earlier. By the stand your ground laws, to some extent, puts the responsibility on you. But it also tells you, don't look to us for not doing our part, because we're giving you the tools to defend yourselves. So in a way, we're doing our part, hint, hint, wink, wink. But we're not actually managing the situation and trying to fix the criminal justice system. Or at least, arguably, I don't expect Rome to be built in a day, but they're not necessarily, you see, yes, you don't give out the crime plan, Minister. But at the same time, you need to give us what is the legislative plan and the cabinet plan, not the crime plan. Don't tell us what the police are going to do. What are you going to do? What is the cabinet going to do, right, with regards to resources, with regards to the intentions in order to manage society and manage the crime problem? We don't need to know what tactically and strategically the police are going to do, where the officers are going to be hiding out and what operations they're going to take. But what is your part to play? Will more vehicles help? Will more stations help? Will new technology help? Will more officers help? How are you going to get these things? What are you going to prioritize in the budget? You don't have to wait until the budget to tell us that in the upcoming budget, this is what we're going to do. This is what our plans are. From the budget side, from the management side. And what does saying, well, stand your ground laws? It says, hey, the responsibility is on you. And don't blame us, blame them. The criminals, only blame the criminals. You can't blame the criminals, but the criminals aren't responsible for fixing the criminal justice system. The criminals are not responsible for ensuring that we could actually detect, capture, gather evidence, charge, prosecute, and imprison properly. The criminals are not responsible for the failures of security with regard to the prison service wholly. They're partially responsible for crime. But to some extent, these things are allowed to happen because we are incapable of managing our country. But it's easy to just blame the criminals. So I get it. I understand exactly what you're saying, Marval. People are frustrated, and to some extent, I can't say that it's wrong for people to want to be able to defend themselves. But here's the thing. How many people are like you that don't want to have a gun? And how are you now going to defend yourself when the gang is coming 4, 5, 6 men deep to invade your house? It's not easy, right? But you know what would have solved all of this is if police response times are less than 5 minutes. Less than 3 minutes. Can it happen? Do we even have anybody looking into why the response times are not anywhere close to what they need to be and how to improve them? The answer is probably no. This is not giving out police tactics, Minister Alexander, for the government to say, hey, we are looking into response times. Why do they take so long? Is it an issue where police stations are located? Patrol patterns? What do we have to do in order to reduce response times? And you don't have to give us the recipe to how you reduce response times. You just need to give us some indications, give us some basics, what new resources you're committing to the problem, in order to show us that you're doing something about it. And then, hopefully, we see the results. All right, with regards to Columbus, here's the thing. Why are we blaming colonialism on Columbus? He is the European that said, hey, look, there's land here, and there are people here, and we could exploit the land. I hate to say this, but this is what humans do, right? Listen, you would like to think that you are morally superior to all these other people. If you were in that society, in that position to do it, you probably would do it. Why? Because we exploit ourselves. We exploit ourselves, right? We're doing it right now. We're doing it right now. So let's not think that we're somehow morally superior, that we won't exploit other people's land and other places and other people. Let's just go beyond that. Most people think that if they were in Germany, Germans living in Nazi Germany, they would do the right thing and end up shot. No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. Most of those Germans were moral, everyday people that were not willing to go against the system. And in a lot of cases, they didn't even know for most of the time that what they were doing was wrong. Because that sort of evil is very insidious and it knows how to hide itself. Now, was Columbus responsible for slavery? Or, well, he discovered or rediscovered. He didn't institute colonialism. He didn't bring the British here. He didn't tell Spain what to do, as far as I'm aware, right? So we want to blame him for colonialism. Did he tell the British what laws to put when they took over Trinidad and Tobago? I don't think so. Did he tell the French what to do when the French plantation owners came and bought slaves? I don't think so. So how is he the poster child for all this? I mean, so what then? Are we going to blame crime on him too? Because, you know, this is the inconvenient truth. We would not be here the way that we are here if it wasn't for him. Trinidad eventually might still exist with another name and another form with another group of people. But to some extent, if you went back in history and said, oh my gosh, Columbus is so evil, let's kill him as a child. Let's not allow him to do what he did. All of us will have a very different existence. Some of us, like myself, probably won't exist at all. My grandparents come from 3 different continents. They basically converged here, had 2 kids who then had me. I won't exist. It's an unfortunate thing where for us to exist, he had to exist. For us to exist, he had to do what he did. And I'm pretty sure he wasn't the slave purchaser or the slave master or the colonial. We're going to put in these laws to make all the people suffer. And how many of us are actually Amerindian anyway? To say that we were exploited by Columbus or we were exploited by colonialism. A lot of us, yes, we're the children of slaves, the children of indentured workers, or the children of Europeans. And quite a few of us are immigrants. I'm half Chinese. That side don't have nothing to do with regards to slavery or plantations. I'm quarter Irish. That side have nothing to do, as far as I'm aware, with plantations, maybe with colonialism. But again, Irish, British, that's a whole other political divide. And I'm quarter Africa. So I think it's a little bit ridiculous. You're trying to put literally everything that you think wrong with history on one guy who basically, he's only guilty of being there at the start. I mean, yes, he's not a nice man. He didn't do nice things, but he did things, based on how we judge things now, right? So at what point are the Normans supposed to give reparations to the Celts, and the Celts supposed to give reparations to the Scots, and the French, and the Germans? What about reparations because you were from a tribe that was attacked by another tribe back in the day that sold you into slavery? What about that? Like, are we going to use reparations for all of humanity's ills or just one? But again, it all depends on what reparations are. I don't know what they are. But I just find this fixation on Columbus. All right, maybe he doesn't have a statue, to be fair. Right? We need to know who he is, but we don't need to celebrate him. I mean, But we are giving colonialism, the specter and the evils of colonialism and slavery are being given power. Because you're making it to be far more important than it needs to be. Because all of the complaints and arguments and how upset you are, nice. It doesn't change history, does it? It still is. And you can't just erase it from happening and think somehow that's going to solve your hurt. Humanity needs a little bit more for modern age thinking than just, oh, well, we'll remove the statue and everything will be fine. Okay. With regards to the leasing and all of that, I'll just say this. This is Mr. Rima. I don't have time to go into all of it. I'll just say this. Part of the problem is not everybody will follow through properly as you intend. There will still be people that want to take advantage of the system. And this goes back to what somebody else said with regards to planning, right? Too often, it's who could benefit from what. So locally, we don't even have the holistic plan. I did mention the holistic plan before Maraval called, right? But we don't even get the part where we subtly undermine the plan. No. The plan outright is for exploitation. That's why there is no holistic plan. We have an airport. Why? Because it benefited somebody for us to build an airport. We sold Heathrow slips, and now Caribbean Airlines flying to England costs us more. Why? Because it benefited somebody to sell the Heathrow slips. And so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. Even the P&M was not immune to this. They used Balize House. Somebody exploited building Balize House for their own gain. Right? They can't even manage their own affairs without internal exploitation. Again, we exploit and take advantage of ourselves. We can't judge other people, whether elsewhere in the world or in past, and somehow act as though we are just morally superior. We are superior beings. We are so enlightened. We can't manage ourselves properly. Maybe if we could do that first, then we will have a moral high ground to complain. Right? So we could set things up and have listen, there's a reason why, as I believe Digicel pointed out, a lot of these people have debts, right? Why? Because you put in a scheme for them to do the right thing and they opt out of it. So then now, what does that mean? That means that we have to have a proper criminal justice system that could deal with all the little things as well, to ensure compliance of all the little laws, not just the big laws, because as the Professor in Shogun has said, we do not obey our laws. There's a breakdown in law and order, not just in the murders, but in how we deal with the white-collar stuff, the day-to-day stuff, the bureaucratic stuff. Because there's a systemic failure and lacking in our society, and we're not willing to fix it. All of our professionals either migrate or they turn a blind eye because they don't want to deal with it. Because no one wants to deal with the bubble that is our local politics. So I hate to come back to this point, but I will close with this. I understand wanting solutions. We could talk about it. But when I speak about politics, it's because to me, that is the root step one solution. Nothing will be fixed without that. The budgets will all be bad, the policies will all be bad, the corruption will be there, and the lack of will to actually get anything done in a constructive manner will always exist if our politics is the nonsense that the way it is. I still have a little bit of hope that the current cabinet will pull us out of that, but some of their ministers are doing everything they can possibly do to say, hold my beer, I will somehow end up worse than the PNM in half the time. Because literally that's what URP tells us happened. And with that said, I hope I'm wrong, but we tend to be proven right about these negative things. So, have a good day, stay safe, remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Never forget, it's nice to be nice, so we could see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN